Have you ever caught yourself thinking, "I'm too old to start now"? Maybe it's learning an instrument, going back to school, starting a creative practice, or simply speaking the truth you've held inside for years. There's this voice, isn't there? Whispering that you've missed your window. The train has left the station. That if you didn't begin at 25, or 30, or 40, then what's the point now? But what if I told you that this voice, this timeline living inside your head, isn't the truth? What if it's just a story, a culturally constructed illusion, and the Buddha knew this over 2,500 years ago? Stay with me. Because today, we're going to dismantle the timeline illusion together. And by the end, you might just discover that the most powerful moment of your entire life is right now. If this resonates with you, welcome to Buddha Coha, where ancient wisdom meets modern healing. Let's begin. Part 1, The Ancient Story, When the Student Was Too Late. There's a story passed down through the Buddhist tradition, not always found in the formal scriptures, but alive in the teaching halls of monasteries across Asia. An elderly man arrived at a monastery just as the sun was setting. His back was bent from years of labor. His hands were rough, calloused from a lifetime of work in the fields. He had walked many miles. When he finally stood before the abbot, he bowed deeply and said, "Venerable teacher, I wish to become your student. I want to learn the Dharma. I want to practice meditation. I want to, finally, begin." The younger monks exchanged glances. Some smiled, not unkindly, but with that particular discomfort we feel when we witness someone doing something we've been taught is inappropriate. One of them stepped forward. "Respectfully, Elder," he said, "most of us here began our training as children. Some came as teenagers. The foundations take years to build. You are, well, quite advanced in age. Perhaps it would be better to focus on supporting the monastery through donations, or..." The old man's face fell. His shoulders seemed to curve inward, as if the weight of all those unlived years had suddenly landed on him at once. But the abbot raised his hand. Silence filled the courtyard. "Tell me," the abbot said gently, looking at the old man, "when is the best time to plant a tree?" The man looked confused, but answered from his lifetime of farming, 20 years ago, Master." "And when," the abbot continued, his eyes twinkling with something both ancient and playful, "is the second best time?" The old man paused. Then, slowly, understanding began to dawn across his weathered face. "Now," he whispered. "The second best time is now." The abbot nodded. "Then welcome, student. Your training begins today." Part 2, The Modern Mirror, Sarah's Untouched Canvas. Let me introduce you to Sarah. She's 53. A mother of 2 grown children. For 30 years, she worked as an accountant, a stable job, a reliable income, the kind of career that made sense. But there was something else. Something she kept in the corner of her guest bedroom, hidden under a sheet. An easel. Paints. Brushes are still in their packaging. Sarah had wanted to paint since she was a girl. She'd dreamed of it, imagined it, felt that particular pull that only a true calling creates. But there was always a reason to wait. First, it was a college, practical degree first, art later. Then it was the entry-level job, establish yourself first, paint later. Then marriage, then children, then promotions, then aging parents who needed care. Later, became a horizon that kept moving further away. Now, at 53, her children were independent. Her parents had passed. She had time, finally, she had time. But when she stood in front of that covered easel, a different voice emerged. Louder than ever. You're 53. Real artists start young. You've missed your window. You don't even know the basics. You'd be starting from zero while people half your age are already established. What's the point? You should have done this 30 years ago. The timeline illusion had her in its grip. One evening, Sarah attended her niece's college art show. The work was fine. Technically competent. But something about it felt hollow to Sarah, though she couldn't quite name why. On the drive home, she felt something rising in her chest. Not quite anger. Not quite grief. Something more primal. She pulled over to the side of the road and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. And for the first time in 30 years, she let herself feel the full weight of it. The unlived life. The abandoned dream. The years of not yet that had somehow become too late. She cried. Hard. The kind of crying that comes from a place we usually keep locked away. But here's what's beautiful about breaking points: sometimes they're not endings. Sometimes they're clearings. In that moment, sitting in her car on the side of the highway, Sarah had a thought that changed everything. What if I'm not too late? What if I'm exactly on time? Before we continue with Sarah's transformation, let me pause here. If this message is touching something in you, if you're feeling seen, or challenged, or even uncomfortable in a good way, would you do me a kindness? Subscribe to Buddha Coha. Hit that bell icon. This is a community of people committed to healing through wisdom. Your presence here matters. And drop a comment below. What's one thing you've been telling yourself you're too late to start? Let's witness each other. Let's break the illusion together. Okay. Let's continue. Part 3, The Buddha's Teaching, Releasing the Second Arrow. The Buddha taught something that directly addresses Sarah's pain, and perhaps yours too. He spoke of the two arrows. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. Aging. Loss. The passing of time. These are natural. They hurt, yes, but they are part of the fabric of existence. But the second arrow? That's the one we shoot at ourselves. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. Our judgment. Our rumination. Our story about what the pain means. When Sarah looked at those 30 years and called them wasted, that was the second arrow. When she told herself she was too late, that was the second arrow. When she compared herself to younger artists and felt shame, that was the second arrow. The Buddha said in the Salatha Sutta, when touched with a feeling of pain, the uninstructed run-of-the-mill person sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught. So he feels two pains, physical and mental. Just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and, right afterward, were to shoot him with another one, so that he would feel the pains of two arrows. But here's the liberation: we can choose not to shoot the second arrow. The timeline is a construction. The idea that there's a right time to begin something, that's not a universal law. It's a cultural story we've internalized. Different cultures tell different stories. In some traditions, elderhood is when the most important learning begins. In others, the second half of life is reserved for spiritual pursuit, precisely because worldly responsibilities have been fulfilled. The Buddha himself didn't teach a fixed timeline for awakening. He had students who were 8 years old and students who were 80. What mattered wasn't when they arrived. What mattered was the quality of their presence once they did. There's a powerful teaching here: the past is gone. The future hasn't arrived. All we ever have is this moment. In the Bodhicharata Sutta, the Buddha says, "Do not chase after the past or place expectations on the future. What is past is left behind. The future is as yet unreached. Whatever quality is present, you clearly see right there, right there. Right there. Right there. Not 20 years ago. Not 20 years from now. Right here. Right now." Part 4, The Transformation, Small Beginnings, True Presence. Sarah's first brushstroke. The next morning, Sarah walked into that guest bedroom. She pulled the sheet off the easel. She opened the package of brushes. Her hands were shaking. She didn't have a grand plan. She didn't enroll in an expensive course or commit to painting a masterpiece. She just mixed some paint, blue and white, and she made a single brushstroke across the canvas. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't skilled. It was just honest. And in that moment, something shifted. She wasn't trying to become a real artist. She wasn't trying to make up for lost time. She was just present with the act itself. The texture of the brush. The smell of the paint. The quiet joy of doing something for no other reason than it was called to her. The Buddha teaches that intention is the seed of all action. Not outcome. No recognition. Intention. In the Nibbedhika Sutta, he says, "It is the intention that I call action. Having formed the intention, one acts through body, speech, and mind." Sarah's intention wasn't to become famous. It wasn't to prove anything. It was simply to honor what was alive in her. To meet herself where she was. To begin. And that is a sacred act. Here's what Sarah discovered over the following months, something she couldn't have known at 25. Starting at 53 gave her something youth could never provide. Perspective. She had lived through loss. She had raised children. She had cared for dying parents. She knew, in her bones, that life is fleeting. So when she painted with a kind of urgency and tenderness that came from knowing time is precious. Freedom from external validation. She wasn't building a career. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. This was for her. That freedom allowed her to take risks, to be playful, to fail without shame. Depth of feeling. Her paintings began to carry something, a quality her niece's technically perfect work didn't have. They had weight. They had lived experience in them. Grief and joy mixed. The texture of a full life. She wasn't trying to be a young artist. She was being exactly who she was, a woman in her 50s who had finally permitted herself to begin. And it turned out, the world was hungry for that. Part 5, The Deeper Liberation, Releasing Judgment of Unlived Years. What about the wasted time? One day, Sarah was talking with a friend who said, "I'm so glad you're finally doing this. But don't you feel sad about all those years you lost?" Sarah paused. A year ago, she would have said yes. She would have marinated in regret. But now, She saw it differently. I didn't lose those years, she said slowly. I was raising my children. I was caring for my parents. I was learning things I needed to learn. Maybe I wasn't painting, but I was living. And everything I lived is in the paintings now. This is the release of the second arrow. Those 30 years weren't unlived. They lived differently. Sarah had been a mother, a daughter, a caregiver, roles that required presence, sacrifice, love. Those roles shaped her. They gave her the empathy and depth that now infused her art. The Dhammapada teaches, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. When we stop judging the past as wrong, we free up an enormous amount of energy. Energy that can be redirected toward now. Part 6, The Urgency of Authentic Expression. The words we haven't spoken. There's another dimension to beginning now that's even more immediate than learning a new skill. It's this, telling the truth. Speaking what's in your heart. Before it's too late. How many of us carry unsaid words? I love you. I forgive you. I'm sorry. Thank you. I see you. We wait for the perfect moment. The right circumstances. When we're less busy. When they're more receptive. When it feels safer. But the Buddha teaches impermanence as one of the fundamental truths of existence. Everything changes. Everyone we love will one day be gone, or we will be. In the Ratthapala Sutta, the Buddha says, the world is swept away. It does not endure. This isn't meant to depress us. It's meant to clarify us. When we truly understand that our time is limited, that this conversation might be our last, that this day is not guaranteed, we stop waiting for perfection. We speak. We reach out. We express. Sarah realized this one afternoon while painting. She thought of her mother, who had passed 2 years earlier. There had been things left unsaid between them. Not dramatic things. Just truths. Appreciations. A particular memory Sarah had never shared was about how her mother's strength had shaped her. She couldn't speak to her mother anymore. That window had closed. But her father was still alive. That evening, Sarah sat down and wrote him a letter. Not a perfect letter. Not an eloquent, carefully edited piece of writing. Just an honest one. She told him she loved him. She told him she was grateful. She told him she was finally painting, and that she thought he'd be proud. She mailed it the next day. A week later, her father called her, crying. He told her he'd read it 5 times. That he'd keep it forever. That it meant more to him than she could know. That was a beginning, too. Part 7, Buddhist Wisdom, The Path is Made by Walking. Teachings on Beginning. Let's anchor this in the deeper wisdom of the Buddha's teachings. A famous Zen saying is, the path is made by walking. You don't need to see the whole road. You don't need a detailed map. You don't need to know if you'll succeed. You just need to take the first step. And then the next. And the path reveals itself. The Dhammapada says, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. One true action. One honest step. One brushstroke. One conversation. That's where transformation lives. Not in the grand plan. Not in perfect timing. In the singular act of beginning. The wisdom of don't know mind. In Zen practice, there's a teaching called beginner's mind, or don't know mind. It's the recognition that not knowing is not a weakness, it's an opening. When Sarah stood before that blank canvas, she didn't know how to paint. And that not knowing allowed her to be fully present, fully curious, fully alive. If she had started at 25 with formal training, she might have learned the right way to paint. But she also might have lost the rawness, the authenticity, the willingness to fail. Starting later, she had nothing to prove and nothing to lose. She could afford not to know. And in that space, something genuine emerged. Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen master, wrote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." Later life beginnings carry this gift, the humility of not knowing combined with the depth of lived experience. It's a rare and potent combination. Part 8, Practical Wisdom, How to Begin Now. Breaking free from the timeline illusion. So how do we actually do this? How do we step out of the timeline illusion and into the power of now? Here are some practices rooted in Buddhist wisdom. 1. Notice the second arrow. When you catch yourself thinking, "I'm too late," pause. Recognize that thought as the second arrow. The past is the first arrow, you can't change it. But your judgment of it? That's optional. Ask yourself, am I adding suffering to this moment with my thoughts? 2. Begin with what's small and true. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Don't wait until you know enough. Just do one small, honest thing. Write one sentence. Paint one stroke. Make one phone call. Send one message. The Dhammapada teaches. Little by little, moment by moment, a wise person removes their own impurities, as a smith removes the dross of silver. Small. Consistent. True. 3. Release the need for outcome. Practice begins for its own sake, not for what it will produce. This is the essence of karma yoga, action without attachment to results. Paint because you love painting, not to become a famous painter. Write because words need to emerge, not to publish a bestseller. Speak your truth because it's alive in you, not to control how it's received. 4. Honor what came before. Those unlived years. They weren't wasted. They were part of your path. Reflect on what you learned during that time. How you grew. Who you became. All of it is material for what comes next. Forgive yourself for not beginning sooner. You are beginning now. That's enough. 5. Embrace impermanence as fuel. Let the reality of impermanence clarify your choices, not paralyze you. Ask yourself, if I had 1 year left, what would I begin? What would I say? What would I finally do? Then ask, what's stopping me from beginning today? The Buddha taught that reflecting on death is not morbid, it's liberating. It cuts through illusion and reveals what truly matters. Part 9, The Authority of Experience. What later life beginnings bring to the world. There's something the world desperately needs right now, the wisdom of people who have lived. We're drowning in youth-centered narratives. The startup founder was 23. The influencer at 19. The prodigy at 12. These stories have value. But they're not the only stories. What about the person who starts a business at 60, after a full career of learning what matters? What about the writer who publishes their first book at 70, with a lifetime of stories to tell? What about the activist who finds their voice at 50, after years of quietly enduring injustice? These beginnings carry a different kind of power. They carry authority. Not the authority of credentials, but the authority of having walked through fire and emerged. Of having loved and lost. Of having failed and gotten back up. Sarah's paintings resonated because they weren't technically perfect. They resonated because they were true. Because you could feel a life in them. The world doesn't need more perfect art. It needs more honest art. It doesn't need more polished words. It needs more true words. And those come from people willing to begin, regardless of the timeline. Part 10, The Call, Your Beginning Starts Now. What are you waiting for? So let me ask you directly. What have you been telling yourself you're too late to start? What dream have you covered with a sheet and hidden in the corner? What truth have you not spoken because you're waiting for the right time? Here's what I want you to understand. The timeline is an illusion. The only time that exists is now. You are not too old. You are not too inexperienced. You have not missed your window. The second best time to plant a tree is now. The second best time to begin is now. The second best time to speak your truth is now. Not perfect. Not polished. Not when you know enough. Now. The Buddha's final words, according to tradition, were, all conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. Strive on. Keep going. Begin. Again and again. This isn't about achieving some external marker of success. It's about honoring what's alive in you while you still have breath. It's about refusing to let the timeline illusion steal another day of authentic living. It's about beginning, small, imperfect, honest, right now. Sarah is 60 now. She's been painting for 7 years. She had her first small gallery show last year. Not because she needed external validation, but because her work found its way into the world naturally. People come up to her and say, I wish I could do what you do. And she always smiles and says, you can. The second best time is now. If this message touched you, here's what I ask. Subscribe to Buddha Coha. This is a sanctuary for healing, wisdom, and beginning again. We need you here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been telling themselves they're too late. You might just change their life. And leave a comment. Tell me, what are you going to begin today? Even if it's small. Even if it's imperfect. Let's witness each other's beginnings. Remember. The best time to start was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when things settle down. Now. The path is made by walking. So take the step. Begin. May all beings be free from the illusion of the timeline. May all beings have the courage to begin. May all beginnings be blessed with presence and truth. Welcome home to now. Welcome to Buddha Coha.